Hey guys, welcome to the bubble camping video. In this video we're going to be talking about using the Pilgrim to camp bubbles in nullsec. Now some preliminary information about this. The Pilgrim, being as that it's cloaky, has a little bit of an advantage in a bubble camp. If you've watched my other guides and videos where I've talked about using drag bubbles and stop bubbles in nullsec, I've kind of drifted towards using stop bubbles instead of drag bubbles. That is, I warp to a gate at 100 from another gate and just drop the bubble right where I land. It's a lot easier that way than it is to try to set up a drag bubble 100k behind a gate. It's probably less effective, but it's a lot easier and a lot faster, so I think it works better. But in other videos with other ships, I will tell you about bubbling, and there's a large emphasis on trying to choose your fights based on your directional scan and based on your positioning. So usually I would have you either, in a small fast ship, you could be sitting right on the edge of the bubble but not inside the bubble and ready to warp off with something selected to warp to, so that if you see it's a, let's say you're in a Tyrannus on a bubble and you see a Sphaepool inbound and you're not ready to fight a Sphaepool because you're not sure if you can take it, then you already have something selected. You hit warp, and before you can come out of warp, you're in warp on your way out of there, and you decided not to fight him. It's a crucial part of PvP to be able to choose your fights. You choose the ones you think you can win. Sometimes you go crazy and you take the ones you know you can't win, and very rarely the ones you don't think you can win, you end up winning, and they're awesome fights. But being able to choose your fights allows you to decide your level of risk. So you can choose what risk level you want. And with a bigger ship, let's say you were in a Cyclone, the shield boosting guide, I would have had you sit at a tactical, a safe spot that's roughly 200 to 300k away from both the bubble and the gate. Therefore, you could warp down to the gate or the bubble as needed. And that way, you would also be on grid, so you could watch it, see what's going on, and watch your directional scanner. The downside to that is that if you were to warp down and sit on the bubble, you may not be able to get out in time if something fast enough comes in. If something cloaky uncloaks right beside you, say a Stratios, you're in trouble. If you don't warp down in time before the ship can turn around and warp out of the bubble, you miss the target. So with the Pilgrim, we take a different strategy. With the Pilgrim, we sit just off the bubble. Like what I'll usually do is, you can see right here, I've got a can, and this first fight's against the Rupture. Nothing too special, but let's go ahead and play it so I can kind of start moving through this. But you see I have a can, and I am cloaked roughly 14 kilometers away. Now what happened just before this is I was sitting still 14k away. That's a good 15k roughly is a good spot to start your fight. So when he comes out of warp, we want him to be about 15k. So now I've seen a Rupture on my directional, or on my directional. I know that he's coming, and he's most likely going to caught in this bubble. This is DY. It's in Cloud Ring. It's a pipe system, meaning it's got one entrance, one exit, two gates. It's a very long system, which helps as well. It's 106 light, or 106 AU, and that means it takes people a long time to warp across. It's much harder for someone to bait. So if someone was to try to bait by bringing bait in and then warping their whole fleet across system, it would take forever, as you'll see in the video where I killed the Dramiel. So it's got a lot of upsides to it. And then I'm 100k off the gate to FD53, so if something comes from that side, it's got to burn to me. So no matter what, I've isolated whatever I have in this bubble, like a spider in his web. I've got it isolated right here, and it's very difficult for anything else to get to us and interfere with us. So I'm 15k off. I can uncloak as needed if I decide to fight. I've decided to fight. A Rupture is a good target for me. His guns are passive, but by kiting, because kiting gives me a little bit of an extra advantage, staying out at about 20 kilometers, most likely he's an autocannon fit, and I can avoid the majority of his DPS. Even if he is a artillery fit Rupture, his DPS is probably going to be manageable enough for me to take him. So uncloak well before he gets to the bubble. So as soon as he comes on directional scan, you want to uncloak. That way you can wait out your 6-second cloaking lock delay. So every time you turn off your cloak, you have to wait 6 seconds before you can lock anything. So whenever possible, you want to get a head start on that, which is what I did. So now that he's landed, I'm able to lock just about instantly. I've already got my hammerheads out. I'm going with my high damage, thermal damage drones here because it just figures rupture. I'm going to just want to drop them really quickly. I don't know exactly how he's fit. Some ruptures are armor, some are shield. Most are armor these days. So I just want to go ahead and engage. I figured thermal's better than EM if he's armor fit. Try to stagger my newts. I didn't do perfectly there, but that's not bad. That's pretty good. Stagger him to keep him capped dead. I don't want him moving. I don't want him getting a point on me, a scram, a web. He could be dangerous if he gets in close. I can look at the damage notifications and try to decipher what kind of weapons he's using. I haven't seen any yet. It's just so far drones that are hitting me and it's doing almost nothing. I'm tearing through him. Going good. He's definitely an armor tank and a buffer armor tank. I'm not seeing any reps on his side. It just looks like he's just a big plate, like a 1600 millimeter plate rupture with some resists. So it's just going to take some time to wear through him. You can see that now that I've controlled his capacitor. I've got his capacitor completely dead. I've turned off my micro warp drive so I can save my capacitor and not have to use as many cap charges because I'm out in space where it's hard for me to refit or to resupply. So I don't want to waste cap chargers if I don't have to. And by just pulsing my micro warp drive here and there and mostly leaving it off, I'm able to minimize the amount of capacitor charges I have to use. I've gone down to 2 newts because I figure he's cap dead, and 2 newts is usually enough to keep any ship cap dead unless they're cap boosting really hard. Tearing through them, no problems here. I haven't seen a single damage. Oh, okay. Okay, they're 220 autocannons is what he's got. Okay. So the 220s, that's a bad choice for him. 220s, even with barrage, out at 20k are not that good unless you have a really good fall-off bonus, and the rupture doesn't have a really good fall-off bonus. So he's out of luck. He was a close-range ship. Had I fought him at 0, he probably or maybe would have killed me. I'm not positive, but it would have been much more dangerous. In that case, it was just a cakewalk, easy. So in this case, I've uncloaked, seeing jackdaws on scan prior to them coming in. I'm in a fleet with a guy in my alliance. So we knew there were 2 of them coming. Sorry, I've got allergies. There's a fleet coming in, and it's not a fleet, 2 jackdaws. Okay, so they're missile boats. They're usually pretty quick. They like to kite. Between the 2 of them, they've got enough DPS to where they might be a problem, but most likely not. They're more of a problem for the guy I'm in fleet with, who is in a frigate of some sort of carries. They could probably kill him if he's not careful. It's the challenge here is not so much surviving these 2 jackdaws. The challenge here is actually holding on to them and killing them. And let's see if I've got audio for this. Doesn't sound like it. No, I don't. About this time, I would have been telling him to try to hold tackle while I get newts on something. If I can get something neuted down, I can slow it down. Like, see, I should have noticed right there, 24k. I should have noticed he got those newts on. Now, I've killed one of the jackdaws. The next thing is to try to see if I can get within newt range of this other one. The guy that's in my fleet with me is going to try to, I don't know if he has a scram, but he's going to try to just hold him down long enough for me to anticipate this guy's movement. See, I'm not just going straight at this guy. Well, actually, I am right now. But oftentimes what I'll do in this case is I'll try to anticipate where he'll be in a few, well, in like 30 seconds. And I'll go in that direction. And so that I intersect in front of him. And a lot of times that way you can make up for a speed differential. So now I've got to get newts on this guy. Once I get newts on him, he's going to die. As it stands right now, I really probably should have, at some point in this fight, pulled in my infiltrators and put out my warriors. But he dies anyway. I'm not really sure. I guess what happened there is he couldn't break the point of the carries, and he couldn't kill the carries. So he was just kind of running around trying to avoid me, hoping that he eventually would break the carries and get away. This is, I'm killing an Astero. There's nothing too special about this. It's just the same thing as before. I saw something come in, and for whatever reason, I decided to get down to the bubble at 0 and put out my drones. And I'll do that too. I don't always sit 14 kilometers away and wait for the target. So I guess that's not quite true. I oftentimes will go right to the decloak and put out my drones and just run my scanner and then wait. And if I see something on directional that I don't want to fight, I will pull in my drones, cloak up, and start aligning out so that I don't get uncloaked when he comes in. I guess that's just a matter of your own opinion at the moment and what you think that person's in. I like to keep an eye on local, and I'll look at the actual pilot, and that gives me an idea. Brave, you figure it's going to be a frigate most of the time, sometimes a cruiser, or it used to be. I think Brave's pretty much dead now. I'm not positive, but they were basically a newer player alliance, and this guy was out doing exploration using an Astero. I think I'm going to show you right here. There was some okay loot, 26 mil. Not fantastic, but it'll pay for quite a few bubbles. So you're going to lose a lot of bubbles. I recommend you use just regular mobile bubbles, Tech 1, mobile small bubbles. I will often use Tech 2 because I can, and because they go up and down faster, plus have a little bit bigger radius. But the speed of the anchoring time is actually more important than the radius. Alright. So now I'm trying to get in the uncloak, and boom, anathema. So a lot of ships are going to be these cloakies that are going to try to warp, and if you're not down there in the uncloak with your drones out, you're not going to catch them. So it raises your risk level. Like I was saying before, you have some control over the level of risk you take. And to go into the bubble and put your drones out, or the edge of the bubble and put your drones out, it's going to increase your risk level. But it's going to get you more of these types of kills as well. And now that he tried to burn through the bubble to get to the gate, big mistake. He's going to lose his pod as well. I'm not sure if this pod is worth anything. What I found is, in general, if you can get the pod, at least probably half the time the pod's worth more than the ship. Maybe not half the time, but quite often. Like right there it was, 75 mil. Not bad. So here we go with the thorax. So I've warped down for my tactical, and I've used, when I warp down, I use this wreck right here as my warp 2, and I warped a 10 on it so that I would be really close to where the bubble would uncloak at. About this point in time, I have to make the decision. Do I charge into the bubble and put my drones out, or do I back off and stay where I am now? And I just decide at this point, based on the amount of people in system and everything, maybe it's best just to stay a little bit safe. That's another thing that you can use to kind of indicate whether or not it's safe enough to go into the bubble. If it's just you and the other guy, and it's just one-on-one, then you're probably okay. Not always, because Black Ops is always going to be a concern. One of the easiest ways to counter you, like if you really piss off your enemy, which you're going to in some cases, what they're going to do is they're going to send a Black Ops Sino into your bubble. And it could be something like, say, a Falcon or a Rapier, another recon that's just going to uncloak right beside you in the bubble. And then if you're uncloaked sitting there with your drones out, he's going to light his Sino even before he loses his cloak delay to lock you and get a point on you. But then, unless you're super quick, and you're probably not going to be quick enough, he'll get a point on you before you can get to warp and warp out, and all of his buddies will be jumping through the Black Ops bridge all over on top of you. So that's one way that they can counter you. And by staying back like this, you're playing a little bit safe. You're waiting to engage until you see what they have. So this way, I know that I'm not going in there to die. You know, a thorax is usually not a Sino ship. So I have a certain level of safety based on that. So now that I know it's a thorax, I uncloak, give myself plenty of time before he actually arrives. Go ahead and get my drones out. So basically, what I'm trying to do is, once this fight starts, I want to put myself in as big of an advantage as possible. And there's all kinds of advantages you can have in a fight based, on the ship you have, the numbers of your fleet, positioning, etc. In this case, by having your drones out, being uncloaked, ready to lock and get DPS on the target, there's your advantage. Your advantage is that this guy is going to be taken by surprise and is going to panic, and he's going to probably make a few mistakes here and maybe double click certain modules or not click the right modules, etc. It's going to take him a minute to fully mobilize his ship onto doing DPS to you and trying to attack you. And you're going to have DPS on him quite a bit sooner than him. And in many fights, not this one, this is kind of a joke of a fight, but in many fights, who gets DPS on first makes a big difference. You can see he tried to run away. It's a good move. Had he got out of my newt range, maybe he could have gotten some room. I don't know. But he's neuted to hell now, and he's going down pretty fast. Main thing you want to do in this situation is you want to avoid getting scrammed. So by being a kite, the reason I push for the shield version of this ship so much more is, for one, that Black Ops thing. Black Ops is a very real threat in this game. And if this guy was a Black Ops Sino, and I saw a Sino drop right now, he doesn't have a point on me. He doesn't have the capacitor necessary to put a point on me. I'm really at very little risk of a Black Ops Sino right now. All I would have to do if I saw a Sino go up is select something and warp off. I can't cloak because he has me locked, his drones have me locked. But I should be able to warp off before anything can get in, lock me, and put a point on me. Because usually the Black Ops process, depending on how they're doing it, they've got to light the Sino, tell everybody on comms the Sino's lit. Then the Black Ops pilot has to right-click on his capacitor, find the bridge 2 instead of jump 2, and be very careful not to hit jump 2. Hit bridge 2. Then the bridge goes up, tell everybody the bridge is up. Then say on comms, bridge is up. And then everybody in the fleet has to right-click on the Black Ops ship and jump through. So the whole process from Sino to actual ships landing on the field, even when done very quickly and skillfully, is going to be, I don't know, probably about 20 to 30 seconds. Maybe if a really good, seasoned group that had done it a lot was doing it, maybe they could get that down to 10, 15 seconds, but it's doubtful. You can see I dropped the thorax really easy. He was a blaster fit. Nothing he could do to me. I mean, that's really one of the easiest fights you're going to come across is one against an active ship like a thorax or a Brutix. You can turn off their guns. You can turn off their tank. Turn off their hardeners. You can basically leave them to where they're not much more than a shuttle with a lot of hit points. So in this fight, let me set it up. I was in a fleet with a guy in my alliance, Drake, and we were just hanging out, just normal night, nothing special, wanted to get some kills. And so I just said, well, hey, I'm over here camping this bubble and, doing the Pilgrim thing. You want to come over and camp, and you can be bait. So this is something you could do as well, as just bring your thorax, something cheap. If you lose it, it's no big deal. It costs a total of 30 mil or 40 mil at most, but probably 30 mil for the whole thorax. And a lot of people are going to take a fight with the thorax, so we can lure some people in like that. And he's like, sure, that sounds good to me. And so he comes over, and we get him in system here. I do have link. No, I don't have links. Okay. So Hans is in fleet, not for links. Hans is actually sitting in B-D, which I would do a lot in this camp. And I recommend you do, when you can, is keep eyes one system up so you know what's coming into your bubble. That way you have a better idea of whether or not you need to be uncloaked in the bubble or uncloaked away from the bubble or cloaked away from the bubble. Like we were talking about before, changing your risk. You can reduce your risk quite a bit if you have an alt cloaked off the gate that enters the system. So in this case, in B-D on the DY gate, Hans is cloaked, roughly 200k above the gate. And I'm keeping an eye on that screen, watching for anything that comes through. And if I were to see the anathema or the astero, then I would go down to the bubble, put out the drones, etc. Bigger stuff, I'd stay off a distance. So the thorax Drake is in. It's in the bubble. He's being baity. I'm telling him to be baity. And we know that these guys, there's 3 Black Legion, and there's a Saber, there's a Confessor, and here's a Hookbill at some point. So we've got a Saber, Hookbill, and Confessor. That is not too difficult of a fight for me to take alone. The problem is that they wouldn't engage me if it was just me. So I can't stress, and I say this all the time, it almost gets old. You have to think from your enemy's perspective. And a lot of times it's better, the better way to fly is to fly in crappy ships than it is in good ships, because you're going to get more fights in a crappy ship than you are in a good ship. And you have to try to control your enemy's perception. Right now, my enemy, which are these 3 Black Legion dudes, they perceive this battle as being a lone thorax in a bubble. Now, a lone thorax in a bubble for a Saber, Confessor, and Hookbill is a fun fight, but it's a guaranteed win. Unless the thorax has some tricks up its sleeve, these guys got this in the bag. They would probably be expecting the thorax to warp away unless he was ballsy, in which case he would take the fight and potentially get a couple kills before he died. They decided to take the thorax, and it's just like I was saying, you have to try to control their perceptions, control the way they think. PvP mind control. Put yourself in their position and say, well, if I had these 3 ships, would I engage this thorax? And if I did engage this thorax, how would I do it? You think about those things. So basically, I've stayed cloak up until this point. And the reason I'm uncloaking now is because I see that these guys have committed to the fight. I can look at the velocities over here, see the Saber, see he's closing, he's turned in on the fight. I can see the Confessor over here. He's at velocity, but he's not quite turned in yet. I think he's burned 177 off so that he can turn around and warp directly to this bubble. You can see that the Hookbill has come out of warp. He had warped across system and back. That's a very common tactic you'll see people use, where they'll warp across system and back on purpose to try to get caught in your bubble because they know that you're in the bubble, and that basically gives them a 0 warp in on you. So he's got a 0 warp in on the thorax. He's got a point on the thorax. I have uncloaked. Now, the way we've got this set up is I'm trusting the thorax Drake to point the Hookbill, and I am going to go kill that Saber before the Confessor can get in. That's what I'm thinking. However, when I uncloak, by the time I can get lock, I miss a second newt on the Saber, and he's able to survive with enough cap to run away. Had I gotten a second newt on him, I don't think he would have been able to get that micro warp drive cycle in, and he wouldn't have been able to escape. So at this point, I've got to make a decision. Now, Drake is not going to be able to survive for a long time under this DPS. So I can either overload and try to chase the Saber, and eventually I'll catch him probably 50k away when his micro warp drive goes dead. But because he'll run out of cap. He's certainly hurting on cap. He just had enough for another cycle, and probably an overloaded cycle. So I could chase the Saber off and leave Drake there to fight with his thorax against the Confessor and the Hookbill. But he's probably going to lose that fight. So I want to try to do what I can to kill these other guys and save Drake in the thorax. So what I want to do is I want to reapproach now. I'm going to start reapproaching. I know he's primarying from being on comms with him. He's primarying the Hookbill. So I'm going to go ahead and get my drones off the Saber and onto the Hookbill. Then I'm going to go ahead and lock up that Confessor. I know that the Confessor is the most active of all these ships. So what I mean by that is the Confessor is the ship out of all these ships that is the most reliant on capacitor. Therefore, my newts are going to have the greatest impact in this fight by putting them on the Confessor. However, I also want to kill the capacitor of the hookbill to turn off any of his hardeners, points, webs. So Drake, if he needs to, can just warp away. So I put 2 of my newts on the confessor, 1 of them on the hookbill. At some point in here, Drake drops point on the hookbill and tries to point the confessor or something, and the hookbill warps away. So we figure we've lost him. And instead we decide, okay, let's just primary the confessor then. Don't worry about the hookbill. Let's take the confessor. As I'm doing that, I notice, hey, well, hold on a second. This Saber, he's within 25k. He wants a newt. So if he gets within 25k again, and I'm going to start moving towards him some, and I'm going to go ahead and get newts on. This time I'm going to try to get more than 1. He's going in for the kill on the thorax because I don't have my watch list up. I usually would. But usually you would see that the thorax was hurting. And he knew the thorax was hurting, so he committed to make sure they got at least some kind of kill out of this. It was probably a good choice. I mean, he lost his Saber for it, but he got 1 kill to put on the kill board of a thorax that's worth, you know, just over half of his Saber. And what do you know, the hookbill comes right back in as the Saber goes down. Not only does it come back in, but he points and webs me. I don't think that was very bright. And he drops really, really fast. So that's just an example of using the Pilgrim in fleets and using it creatively. You can bait with something else, have your buddy bait, and then use the Pilgrim to be the surprise. It's always nice to have an ace in the hole. And Eve especially. Fights are so heavily decided by who can double their firepower in the middle of a fight. So this must have came after that thorax. There's a catalyst coming in. Not even sure why this made the video because it's pretty basic. And we're going to find out. Where 2s for the catalyst. This should be super, super easy. So long as I get a point on him before he can get back into warp, which should be easy. Newt him and get warrior 2s on him. He'll go down real quick. Let's see, well, no, he wasn't trying to run away. Now he is. But it doesn't matter, it's cap dead. He's a Galante ship as well. He's a turret ship. He can't even shoot me anymore. I could go in close. You see I'm going right up to him because I realize that there's nothing this guy can do to me at this point. And that's pretty much it. I think that was the last fight. Yeah, it was. Alright, so that's the end of the bubble camping video. And so the takeaways from this is it's just like any other bubble camp. You warp to the gate at 100. So say you would start over here at BD gate. I just figured in this case, you got to think which way is most of the traffic going to be going. And that depends on the time of the night. That depends on the area. The more time you spend in an area, the better you're going to be able to know those things. It's just experience. So I warped from BD to FD53 at 100, landed 100k off, released my bubble or deployed it or whatever it's called, launched it, and then I anchored it, put a can on the uncloaked spot. The uncloaked spot is basically if you get on 0 in the bubble and then align to the gate you came from. Once you get to the edge of the bubble, you jettison your can right on the edge of the bubble. That'll help uncloak people. And then you wait. Ideally for safety, you sit about 15k off that can outside the bubble so that you can decide whether to uncloak or not based on what you see on directional. Choose your risk level, and that is bubble camping in a Pilgrim. And I have to say it's a lot of fun. I did it almost, probably 5 nights a week for 2-3 weeks straight in this system primarily, and we got a lot of stuff. I don't know where the videos are for it, but we also got a Raven and several other really nice ships in this camp that it was a very productive camp. And this was kind of like a dream system for camping at that time, and it probably still is with how active I was about to say content ring, cloud ring is. The slang term for it right now is content ring, because that's where a lot of activity is at the moment of this video. But by the time, you know, in a month from now, it could be somewhere else, probably will be somewhere else. But that's your bubble camping video, and I highly suggest you go out and do it. It's an easy way to get kills. This, out of all the tactics that you're going to see me do, this one right here is the easiest. This, if you want to build your confidence and just start putting some kills on the kill board, this one is the easiest. You have full control over what fights you take. You're not jumping through a lot of gates once you get to your target system. You're just sitting there and you have control. It's unlikely they're going to bait you. It's certainly less likely than if you were like hanging out in their home system. So in this case, people aren't going to take the time to bait you in most cases, unless you've really pissed them off. So this is probably the safest and easiest way to get kills right from the start when you're flying your Pilgrim. Then later on, you can move on to some of the more difficult stuff, like going into their system and stalking them and sitting on a gate at 0 or at 2,300 meters cloaked, waiting for something juicy to jump in, like a hauler or a miner, and then uncloaking right there on the gate. Or perhaps having eyes on the other side of the gate, and as soon as you see something landing to jump through, you're on the other side. You don't even need a bubble. They don't know you're there because you're cloaked on both sides with you and your alt, and you uncloak, and boom, you've got an effective gate camp that I used quite a bit when I was living other people's systems. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get lots of kills using these tactics.